VoteProPot would like to apologise for the audio quality of the following podcast. Due to a technical issue of an unspecified nature, we are unable to bring you audio that is up to our normal VoteProPot-Cast quality standards, which is a pity, actually, because we do work very hard at this. Still, we are very sorry about it, and we promise that it won't happen again. Actually, I can't really promise it won't happen again, because as soon as I've said that, then of course it does happen, and then I get yelled at, which is typical. But there you are. Anyway, for those of you who do stick it out to the very end, we have a lovely musical bonus for you that we're sure you'll enjoy. All right, we're not entirely sure you'll enjoy it, but you probably will do. It is rather good. But I suppose that's not for us to say, really, is it? You'll either like it or you won't. But if it gets you past this whole audio thing, I suppose it's worth it. I mean, it's not really that bad. Just a little tinny is all. It's not as though you're all so perfect, you bunch of nitpicking bastards. I mean, who died and made you God Almighty? I don't know why I have to apologise anyway. It wasn't my bloody fault. You tell me to push the bloody button, I push the bloody button.
Welcome to VoteProPot-Cast, the award-winning cannabis news podcast brought to you by VoteProPot.com. Here are your hosts, Phil Adams, Jay Britton, and Andrew McCreadys.
Well, you have picked a terrific time to tune in to VoteProPot-Cast because you are about to hear our 100th episode. Isn't that something?
Yay!
Wow. So, you know, consider
yourselves... Is that 100 years or 100 episodes?
100 episodes.
Okay. Feels like 100 years.
Only a year and a half.
Okay. Right.
So, you know, kind of cranking them out here. Anyway, we're really glad to have everybody with us. And there may be some folks who have been with us since the first show, but I kind of doubt it. But you know, there's some folks listening out there. What do the numbers look like, Jay? Just out of curiosity.
They're great. They're great. We've had tens of thousands of downloads. So life's good.
Wow.
I'll have a quiz for you guys later.
I've
got being the keeper of the stats. I have some stats, and I'll throw.
Jay is the keeper of the stats.
In the back of your mind, think about.
Andrew's the keeper of the stash.
Which episodes do you think were the most popular? Which states have the most downloads? And which states have the least? Think about that in the next few minutes, and
all right,
we'll have a little quiz.
Okay, we'll think about that. But first of all, what I was going to throw it over to you, Andrew.
Yeah, well, I'd just like to take this opportunity now for our 100th episode to say that this has been a long journey. I conceptualized the phrase Vote Pro Pot back in 2013.
Jeez.
And I was playing with it. And so I started the Facebook site and started an active movement in 2014 in time for the election in Maryland. And I backed Heather Mazier was a candidate running for governor. And her platform was, we're going to legalize marijuana and pay for education. So I helped her.
And that appealed to you, you might say.
Yeah, it did. I volunteered on her phone banks, and I then I did a lot of work on social networking. Man, I was all over the place. I was back in Facebook. I could boost anywhere, anytime. It was great, and no problem.
Before they got to research,
before they
you were blacklisted.
And well, anyway, she got primaried. She didn't make it through, which was cool. She was a nice, wonderful woman, absolutely wonderful. Really, really liked her personally. But we got Larry Hogan instead, and you know I'm not sad about that.
We can live with Larry Hogan.
We live with Uncle Larry. We love Uncle Larry.
Uncle Larry's cool.
Uncle Larry's cool. Uncle Lair. Well, anyway, but what I sort of discovered then was I decided from now on I'm not going to jump in wholeheartedly and just back a candidate as opposed to let's just really concentrate on the issues. And so after that, I got involved in the D.C. cannabis campaign, And I was down carrying signs on Connecticut Avenue, legalize, legalize. I remember I was standing one day, and this woman was walking by with her son, who was probably like 7 years old, and he looked up at his mother and goes, legalize what, Mommy? And she looked at me like, oh, you son of a bitch.
This.
I just smiled. Said, you got to have the conversation with him sometime,
Yeah.
Eventually.
But,
But
so
not
that
today.
was great. And I worked there, and I met candidate Bowser, and we talked about legalizing in
From Shanana?
D.C. Yes, from Shanana. Mayor Bowser.
I remember about
No, Mayor Bowser. She actually, I was very impressed with her when I met her. Anyway,
Yeah, I always liked
so then it just sort of erupted from Facebook. Then it went on to LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram and then one day Jay came to me and said, "Man, we should do a podcast." And I said,
Well, that's right.
Sure.
He said, you've got an audience. Because
Well,
the thing was, Andrew, that you were, going along. Next thing you know, you've got like 6,000, 7,000
Hey,
followers.
Over 10,000. I had well
over 10,000 followers. And just like, what the hell, man?
And you know what's interesting is Phil and Andrew and I used to go to dinner once a month or so.
Once a month.
And we would sit in a restaurant and have a couple beers and talk and eat barbecue or something. And we would laugh and tell stories. And one day, that's how it came to me. I said, this is really funny shit, man. We should really do this.
I bet you there's a lot of friends who sit around and think that same thing.
Yeah, right.
And
Well,
stuff gets started that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I can remember people sitting next to us starting listening to us and entering in our conversations.
That's right.
That should tell you something right there.
Oh, and it's crazy. I remember one day we were talking about if you could change the sound your butt made when you fart, what sound would you change it to? And the tables around us are all just going, I can't believe you guys, man. What the
High
fuck
class
are you talking
stuff,
about?
man.
Born from an 18-wheeler. Just saying.
I know. But we were enjoying ourselves. We were laughing our asses off. And then at my birthday party just a couple weeks ago, that happened again with a bunch of us.
Yeah,
We
a bunch
had
of us
not
got
just the
together.
three of
It
us.
was
We had
great.
a couple other guys, and it was hilarious.
It was a
God,
lot
my
of fun.
sides were hurting.
Yeah.
That was like one of the best birthday dinners I ever had.
Well, the thing for me, Andrew, is I'd gotten away from doing music somewhat, and Phil's more into it still than I am, but I'd kind of gotten burned out on it. But I have all this equipment, and I love producing stuff, and that's why I said, I want to do a podcast. What can I do a podcast about? I'm not a radio guy. I've got a face for radio, but... And that it came to me that, boy, he's got an audience. We got a built-in audience. Phil's got the voiceover background, so... What the hell?
What the hell? And we kind of made this up as we went.
Have you guys listened to the first show in a while? It is horrendous.
Is it? Well,
compared to
as
now.
first shows are apt to be.
And actually, before we did the first show, we did like a test run that we actually had we had a character put on film, did an imitation of someone called Captain Chronic. And it was
Captain Chronic. I remember that guy.
That's right.
right. Captain Chronic was from Chicago.
He's a real stoner.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's right. We had all these characters and stuff.
And we listened to, after we recorded, I had a friend of mine listen, and I had a cousin who's into the news, and she was like, don't admit that. No. That Captain Chronic thing is just fucking, man. Oh, no, don't.
Don't go down that road. So anyway, here we are.
But then it got serious. We started the podcast, and also the social networking's really taken off.
Yeah,
And we've seen, like, when we first started, Colorado was the only adult use state. That was it. And
Wow.
Just Colorado.
since I started this, I've really seen, it
huge
just
changes,
really
yeah.
evolved. And I've learned a few things. One thing I've seen is, I thought when we got to legalize marijuana. And I thought, we got to get there. We got to convince everyone we got to legalize it. Well, that kind of happened pretty quickly. Everyone more or less realized, because really just the people that were really against it died. They just literally died off, because really the most opposition were the older people.
Well, it's been a long time.
Now we're seeing people in senior citizens' homes that went to Woodstock, and
Yeah.
and so the opinions have changed. So I've really seen. So now it's not if they're going to legalize,
Right.
it's when and how, and that's the big issue is how
And what it's going to look like. That's right.
That's exactly right.
right, and that's why we got to be involved.
People like us and people that care like us and shows like ours need to steer the regulations and steer the legislation in the right direction. Otherwise, you get shit legislation. What's the point?
Right. And not only that, but there are lots of holdouts who, and especially on the federal level, who just are not going to budge unless public opinion pushes them to do it.
Crapo.
So,
do you think marijuana will never be legalized or taken off Schedule 1 on a federal level as long as Mitch McConnell is the majority Speaker of the House?
I'm not convinced
I don't
of
think
that.
it has to do with Mitch.
I really don't either.
I think, Mitch is a practical guy. And
he's a pragmatist.
And a little, over the years, had been a little bit too pragmatic for my liking. But I'm not quite the ideologue that I used to be. So,
I don't think I think as long as he's there, ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
He's not going to let it happen.
You might be right.
You may be right.
We gave him all this credit for the Farm Bill, but the Farm Bill really wasn't all that big of a deal. It allowed people to grow hemp, but it didn't allow you to do anything with it.
Right.
You can't put it in food. You can't make extract out of it. You can't make like keef or shatter or anything like that.
It's
if you make
more
oil,
industrial.
You've got to dilute it to get it down to 0.3%, which just it's insane. The whole hemp thing is all these farmers. God bless them. They went out and tried to make a little extra money and jumped through all the hoops, applied for all the all the permits, paid all the fees, and they grew it. And nobody showed up with a truck of cash to buy it from them. Now they're just sitting on it. And so many hemp farmers who grew this year are going, screw that. It's really labor intensive because it's really hard to grow hemp. We grow it well. Yeah. And I'm not doing it next year. No way. Forget it.
I've seen multiple articles in the last week on just what you're saying, Andrew. These farmers who have thousands of pounds they grew, and if they're not vertical, what do they do with it? Right, they assumed as soon as I pick my crop, man, I'm going to be a millionaire.
Yeah,
and there's nobody there to
buy this up.
You can change it to oil, and there's a guy here in Maryland. I'm working with a Maryland hemp company, and they got a quote for 150 pounds was going to cost us $80,000 to process into oil.
Wow. Let's bring Faye in here. Faye, of course, is our chief health and wellness correspondent. What are your thoughts on that?
Hey,
the question that goes through my mind with all this hemp stuff is, why are they only talking like smokable, putting into food? What about all these promising things like houses out of hemp and
hempcrete?
Yeah, they're clothing out of hemp, and supposedly it's more bio-sustainable and all of that. Where'd all that go?
It's coming along.
There's different types of hemp. Now, a lot of the hemp that people grew for CBD looks more like looks like medical marijuana. It has the same terpene profile. Okay. I mean, it smells. It looks just like bud. Now, the stuff you grow for clothing and fiber is a tall, lean plant. It looks nothing like the
I see.
And it's also those plants look more like sugar cane, where there's going to be like 20 plants per square foot. Per square yard.
I think they grew the wrong hemp, because that's where we really need it. Is where that with the earth and all of that stuff, if it's so much more sustainable.
But it was the CBD thing. It was all the CBD craze. Everyone wanted to get in on the CBD bandwagon. What is your view on the whole CBD thing? Yeah. What do you think, Faye?
What do you mean? What do you mean?
I mean, you're going into convenience stores and gas stations seeing CBD, and then you go to a pharmacy and you might see CBD. I mean, it seems to me some of these products, aren't really viable medicines, and some are.
Well, and that's the thing. We don't know enough about it. It's exactly like the supplement industry. There's no regulation. Right. You sometimes don't know what you're getting. And I think they've gotten better in the supplement industry over the years. But back in the day, there was very little regulation and people didn't know what they were getting. And so you could go to the gas station and buy CBD.
Right.
And if nobody's labeling it, nobody's testing it, and I know some people don't like the regulation, but the truth is, you could be buying olive oil
in
a pill.
That's true.
Or you could be buying gasoline in a pill, for all I know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or some placebo, yeah. I mean,
exactly.
No, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, but then if you go to some viable sources, there are very viable companies that are growing medical grade hemp. And that's really what you're looking for.
Right.
It's tested, it's organic, because hemp is a bioaccumulator. It takes in all the toxins. There's no state testing if it's hemp, CBD hemp. However, if it's cannabis hemp with some THC in it, then we're regulating it more clearly.
Yes.
Well, Andrew, you're involved in the hemp industry. What are your thoughts? Where do you see it going?
Well, to make an extraction, what happens is you actually increase the percentage of THC in the finished product because you're taking out the waxes and the chlorophyll, and so to make it legal to sell, you have to dilute it so it's back down to the 0.3%. But when you're diluting that, you're also diluting the CBD and everything else.
Terpenes,
and it's kind of it's the ratio of THC to CBD is going to be the same before and after the extraction. So that's and I don't know it's. Right now in the hemp industry, there's a lot of people on both sides that really don't understand why can't we extract it? Why can't we put it in food? What do we do with it now that we grew it? And you passed the bill so we could grow it, but you didn't make any regulation. But you made enough regulations that we can't do anything with it once we grow it.
Right, that's so stupid.
And you know what that smells like to me?
Government
crony capitalism. The government sets these regulations and only doles out the permissions.
Right.
To the people who are connected.
Yeah.
Right. And it's unfair.
Let me backtrack a second on that one, because I don't want CBD going into everything that I'm drinking and eating, because again, how do we know if it's good CBD?
No, that I get. No. Yeah, no, there has to be the testing and the standards and quality control, labeling. Those are all important. But the problem is that anyone ought to be able to do it, and anyone can't do it.
Right. Yeah.
Well, you know what I think? Marijuana has always been harmless because we've always been smoking it, or eating it in low doses.
Ingesting it in some
way. But now, since there's all these concentrates coming out, and people are starting to take, they're concentrating much higher quality plants. I think that, Faye, do you think that could have future health problems?
And there's a lot going on, and I think in another episode I have some things that we'll cover regarding that. But even the terpenes alone, if you think about the terpenes alone, they each have different effects. And, they're studying the effects, and some of them are like uplifting. So how do we not know that some of those terpenes, might have some kind of effect that's contraindicated?
In combination with,
other things. Yeah, I happen to think there's an entourage effect with caffeine and THC. I don't have any proof on that, just based on some stories I've heard and personal experience.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. I'm with Andrew.
Oh, man, when I was in college, we used to do morning C&Bs, man, coffee and bong hits, man. Every morning in college.
What effect does it have that you
I'm talking about a teeny, like in the same way that THC helps the efficacy of CBD, and we do know that. That's why for some people, CBD products alone are not helpful. Right. They need the THC, and then they're getting into medical cannabis if medical is in their state.
Lately, I've been thinking that the level of THC in the medical marijuana isn't as important as you think. I'm sort of enjoying lately, I'm really looking at the strains that I'm buying, and the ones that have the higher THC aren't necessarily the ones that I really like the best.
You enjoy. That's interesting.
And
I agree.
Or even really get the most, just because one has a lot more THC doesn't really mean to me that I feel like it gets me higher.
Well, related to that, I have a question for Faye, because we did a thing last week on low THC, right? A market for it. And that's what Andrew's leading to here. And you said, in your experience in the dispensary, it doesn't sell.
Doesn't sell. It's interesting because it is true what you're saying about the THC and the levels, because, again, it's all about the terpenes, So people are not just looking at percentages of THC, they're looking at the percentages of terpenes. And it could be a very low percentage of terpenes, or it could be, you combine all the terpenes together and you look at the percentage of terpenes. Now, many of the states don't even label terpenes. We're lucky in Maryland that we have that information available to us.
That's true.
So I've learned a lot more just by being in Maryland than I would in many other states. But it's the combination of the THC and terpenes. So, one of my favorites is not so high in THC, but I like the combination of the terpenes, and they help me with my digestive issues, and it just works well.
What have you learned, Jay, since we started?
Wow. I've learned a lot, because I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything when we came into this. I mean, I guess what I would say is a couple
things. I
learned
most of it from Andrew, right?
Yeah, well, same here. But what comes to mind is, first of all, I have to admit, I didn't realize why cannabis was illegal to begin with,
No, me neither.
And we covered that in our very first episode, and I learned a shit ton. I didn't know all that. All the
super unfair.
Yeah, all the discrimination and the racism that was involved, and big business squashing hemp and all that. And if you want to kind of hear us go over it, check out our very first episode. We kind of cover the history.
No, please don't.
No, we do cover
that bad.
No, it's not. And we cover the material. But that's probably one of the things that the biggest takeaways for me. What about you, Phil?
Well, now I've learned a lot from our guests that we've had, and we've had a bunch, and we'll get to those. I'm kind of approaching a lot of this from a certain political standpoint, as you might imagine, since we're a VoteProPot, and as we've mentioned, from the conservative side, and I've kind of learned and been kind of struck by how much the cannabis saga in America is a microcosm of politics writ large, and economics. Well, let's just start with the economics of it. People are starting. I remember a time when they would just say, make it legal, tax the hell out of it, everybody wins. And that's partly true and partly definitely not true. There are still laws of economics that apply, laws of supply and demand, and all of the other ones that we learn in Econ 101 that people are discovering as they go along. Well, you can't just grow a bunch of marijuana plants and think you're going to get rich off of it.
And tax it at 80%.
Right. You can't tax a product at 80% and have people have choices. Yeah. So we learn all these things, and they really apply in many ways to the world at large, or our country at large, as far as the truisms that drive political discourse.
Absolutely.
That's one thing I've learned. Everyone thought when you hear legal marijuana, you think, oh my God, look how we should do that because it'd be so easy to make all the money grows on trees. I mean, look how easy that would be. And that is really far from the truth. It is not. This industry is not easy.
It's
not getting easier either.
No.
The competition's getting stiffer. And Faye, now you work in the industry. What would you say? What is your impression of the industry, and how is it different than before you got into the industry?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know about before I got into the industry because
you didn't have
there.
An opinion, really.
Exactly. I mean, I was a patient, first. It became legal December, I think we said 18, and I became a patient in 19, not maybe 6 months after. So I was a patient before I actually worked in the industry. But so what surprised me just in general about the industry itself is how corporate it is.
Right.
Really?
You were, it's cannabis, man, whatever. Because, back then it was like the antithesis of anything corporate.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, but it's very corporate with a corporate structure, and you've got,
HR,
mostly white males at the top of these structures, and, you've got HR, and you've got, all the corporate structures that are in place. And for me, it's very interesting. I haven't worked in corporate America for quite some time, but it just seems a little bit like counterproductive to the whole cannabis thing. But I was really surprised about that.
But when you think about it, it's a product, just like anything else.
It makes sense.
You produce it, people consume it, you distribute it, you sell it. It's a product.
And the people who had enough money to invest in it, and put together a board of directors and gather the financing. Well, that's more corporate,
Yeah.
And they came from others. A lot of these people, some of the corporations go from state to, they know they've been successful in this state, then they'll go to this state, and I've just watched that happen. And it's really who's going to have the money. What I think what I'm hearing, though, is that a lot of them just continue to reinvest, except till when it's becoming adult use. That's when the they're all kind of holding out for when it's adult use everywhere.
Correct.
Yeah, waiting for that.
Well, one thing that Steve D'Angelo, we were talking to Steve D'Angelo, and one thing we talked about the industry, and that is, granted, there's a lot of people coming from corporate America, and there's corporations getting into the cannabis industry, but they don't know cannabis culture. And as it turns out, there's a need for people in this industry that understand the cannabis culture. Just because you're great in business doesn't mean you're going to succeed in the cannabis industry. And in fact, you're going to be a fool if you think that you can get into this industry and not embrace the culture and and think you're going to do it without knowing something about the call.
That was kind of an eye opener for me.
Yeah.
So that whole concept, it's true.
Well, speaking of Steve D'Angelo, let's take a look for a minute at some of the interviews we've done in the last few months. And I made a list like before we went on here, and we've interviewed some pretty big hitters and some really influential people in the industry. And like Phil said, I've learned a lot from these people that we've interviewed.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Steve D'Angelo, you mentioned, we had him on episode 89. He's the father of the legal cannabis industry. If you follow this, you know who he is.
Right.
Steve Fox was just on a couple weeks ago, and
I learned more from him than just about anybody else.
He was great, and he's
from the political style.
Well, he's the real deal. He's the guy. He wrote the legislation. He's the closer. He's the guy that's actually making it legal.
And the president of the Cannabis Trade Federation. Yeah. Is that right, president? Anyway.
Yeah, and also I'd like to comment on that for a second. Well, when he was on the show and during the interview, he said he was from the Federation, and you started making Star Wars references to him. Now, isn't the Federation Star Trek?
No, well, the Federation of Planets is Star Trek, but the Trade Federation is Star Wars.
He did. That was the only time he even kind of cracked a smile.
This is frog-faced guys with the big hats.
Yeah. Steve was a pretty serious dude. I tell you one of my favorites. Well, there's a bunch of favorites. Keith Straub was great.
Oh,
and for those of you who don't know Keith started Normal in 1970.
He started Normal with a $5,000 donation from Hugh Hefner.
That's right.
Yeah.
The Playboy Foundation. And
he is now their chief legal counsel.
Yeah. Now you ask what we've learned, Andrew. I learned through people like him how difficult the road was to get legalization. It took
even this far. Yeah.
Oh my God. It's been a 25, 30 year, journey, and these guys have worked their tails off.
Yeah.
Well, I remember going to Normal things back when I was in high school. Like
Right.
Normal,
That was Keith. Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember the smoke-ins down on the mall?
Oh yeah.
And we'd all go down, stand right next to the Washington Monument, between the Washington Monument and the Capitol, and just smoke weed like crazy right out in the open.
A couple of my other favorite interviews we had on Madison Margolin. Remember Madison?
You gave a great interview of Madison.
She was excellent. She's a world-renowned cannabis journalist who's written for everybody from Playboy and Rolling Stone and High Times. She writes for everybody, and she's fantastic. Really intelligent lady, really young, and really.
She also wrote a cookbook, a kosher cannabis cookbook.
That's right. She did. She's fantastic. I really enjoyed her. And of course, Jimmy Young. Jimmy Young is great, man. Jimmy's is the
blast.
He's the founder of the Pro Cannabis Media Group, and he hosts the In the Weeds, another podcast.
Yep.
And he's just a great guy, man. He's a Bostonian ex sports broadcaster who's dedicated his journey now to starting a media compound with nothing but cannabis 24 hours a day. So he's a really interesting character and a lot of fun.
Actually, I think the best interview we ever had was the woman that we eventually asked to join the panel.
That's true. Yeah.
Really, they just started. We got an interview and said, we just got to get her chair, get her permanent chair.
Yeah, Faye.
And now when she's not hanging out smoking joints on the beach in Jamaica, or going to New York to the Broadway where her daughter's working on Broadway.
It was a business trip.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
What was your business? Sure. Buying joints and working on your tan?
Business man. All right, guys, you ready for a quiz?
Yes.
We're getting low on time here. All right, let me throw a couple. Think about this for a minute. I did a search today, and I did a sort, okay, of all of our episodes, all 99 of them. 99. And so I'm going to tell, I don't think you'll be able to guess. If you had to, the number one episode, download-wise, the most episodes, and it's actually probably 30% more than any other episode we've ever had. I'm just going to tell you because you want to know, is episode 1. It's the history of the marijuana prohibition. And you would say, that was our first episode, so it's the oldest. But that doesn't have anything to do with it. Because the second most popular download we've ever had is episode 85, which is the show we did about Joe Rogan.
About
Joe Rogan and Joe Biden, remember?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the second most popular.
Because Joe Rogan called Joe Biden out.
Yeah, that's right. Well,
right.
And so
it's interesting how Joe Biden and Mike Bloomberg, how their opinion on cannabis is, since it was so strictly anti, how it's kind of evolving.
You think?
Have you noticed that? Even Bloomberg's going, this medical is okay.
Is he really?
Yeah, they're called politicians, my friend, and that's how it works. They
don't care which way the parade's going as long as they're in front of it.
Yeah, that's right. A couple more things here. Okay, I'm going to quiz you guys. The states first of all, let me say, we have now had downloads in over 50 countries, which is really cool. Really cool. 50 countries, man. But anyway, so the states, United States, the top 4 states for us in downloads since we started. Just tell me, guess the number one.
I'm going to guess Georgia.
No.
You're kidding.
It's either California, Texas, or Florida.
Pick one.
Florida.
Colorado.
California.
Texas.
None of you are correct. You're all damn close. California's number 2.
All right.
Now, a lot of this is population. I mean, in fairness,
Yes.
But number 1 is Illinois.
Yeah.
That's our number 1 state for download. The order is Illinois, California, Florida. So you guys had the right states, except for Colorado.
Well, I remember when Florida was rolling out their program, the medical program, it was sort of in the news, in the cannabis news a lot. And then at that point, Florida was number 1 on our listeners. I remember that. And now that Illinois has just rolled out theirs, maybe
That's true. That's true. That's probably right.
Yeah.
There's a correlation there. Plus, remember, we did some interviews with several Florida folks. Remember?
Yes, we did.
Different medical folks early on, and I think that I've noticed
that guy that got high with alligators. Remember him?
Yeah, definitely. When we do an interview, we get a lot of downloads in that state. That goes without saying. So the final one, those are the top 3. Okay, Illinois, California, Florida. Number 4 is Texas, which shocks the shit out of me.
Well, it's a big issue in Texas. Man.
I guess it is.
Texas is a big state. Texas is a huge state.
Well, that's the other thing, Andrew. You're right. There's a lot of folks, but we do have a lot of passionate listeners. We get a lot of emails and messages and stuff from Florida listeners. So, Texas listeners.
Florida and Texas.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
that's another example to show how strong that because Texas has always predominantly been a pretty red state.
Yeah.
How cannabis is a big red issue.
That's exactly right.
We were all pretty surprised about Oklahoma.
Yeah,
and
to say the
Oklahoma
least.
was pretty red.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, I just don't know that it goes along those lines quite as much as we want to think.
I think you're right. I think you're exactly right.
Yep. Oh, I love Oklahoma, man. I think we should change the song from Sweet Home Alabama to Sweet Home Oklahoma.
There you go. All right, now the states.
Call Leonard Skinner right now. Get him on the phone.
States with the least downloads.
South Dakota.
That's the first. That's
well, who didn't know that? Well, they don't have internet in South Dakota, do they?
Well, you guys just having fun.
Okay, remember, if you're gonna really give a state a hard time and say bad things about it, pick a state with a really low population.
The other 3.
I was going to say about Illinois.
Yeah.
That does make a lot of sense. Well, from what I'm seeing, let's just say that when Illinois became adult use, it far exceeded what happened in Massachusetts, like exponentially.
Yeah.
And they ran out of product in Illinois. And so there's clearly, that
a passion
state,
there
for
for
whatever reason, is very cannabis friendly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think Illinois sold more their first day than Canada did their first day.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy numbers.
No kidding.
It was insane.
That is
the
nuts.
first week, it was insane. Illinois really, and God bless them.
Yeah, man. Well, the other real quick, the 4 worst states: South Dakota, Mississippi, Vermont. And the other one that surprises me is Maine.
Well, because they've been into weed has been sort of accepted there for so long.
Maine and Vermont.
That's true.
Tell them to vote pro pot is like old news.
Faye says they're too busy smoking.
Yeah,
They don't care about the politics.
All those hippies up there.
I love Maine. So anyway, there you go.
So you go there a lot, Faye, huh?
I know.
That makes sense. Well, of course, California is adult use, so we get a lot there. But it's almost as if where there is no legalization, we have a lot more listeners. Where there's there's plenty of legalization.
There's some truth to that.
California kind of puts the line.
Well, but California's so big. I mean, it's just the population.
And it's still a big issue there, man. California regulating cannabis in California. It's going to be an issue for a while.
It is. They got to get it straightened out.
I think it's got too much going on there, man.
Well, that just shows you guys are doing the job. People are listening. They want to hear what's going on, and you guys are providing it to them.
We are getting it done, Faye.
We did get an email a couple of weeks ago from a gentleman who basically said, "I've used your information in arguments that I've had."
Wasn't that in like a homeowners association meeting or like
something like
building?
that? And they didn't have an answer.
Yeah,
and we're like, yes.
Hey, he goes, yeah, I'm still waiting on the response. Well, there's one story I want to bring up. There was a guy who went to court in Tennessee for possession of marijuana. And he stood before the judge, and the judge talking to him, and he pulls a joint out and fires it up.
Oh,
it gets too big, gets two hits off it. The bailiff comes in and grabs his hand, so he switches his joint to the other hand, and he takes the phone, and then he holds it up in the air like he's waving around, going, "Yeah, fucking smoke a joint, man!"
Yeah,
and everyone in the court's going, "I can't." You see people they can't believe their eyes are going, "Is that guy just? Oh, gee, this guy just
what the hell? Am I dreaming?"
Right?
Yeah,
and everyone, even the bailiff was going, "Dude, what?"
I bet there's some people laughing
and
too.
And he said he planned it. That's it, And he got charged with disorderly conduct.
Well, yeah, he should.
That's not bad. I mean, $25.
If you think about it, man, there was a
time for a story like that.
There was a time if you were down south and you lit up a joint in front of a judge, you were going to jail, buddy,
for a long time.
Yeah, that's right.
And to get, disorderly conduct is a slap on the wrist, and that's Tennessee. So I'm saying, times they are changing.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us today for our 100th episode. We sure did enjoy it. Thanks to Faye for joining once again. We sure would love to hear your thoughts on anything and everything related to cannabis and Vote Pro Podcast. Send us an email at podcast@votepropot.com. Where else can they get in touch with us, Jay?
Please call our message line at 240-257-2441. And we ask that you jump over to lastprisonerproject.org. Check them out and make a donation if you can.
Okay, something happened this week I got to talk about. At the end of the show every week, you hear a song called Freedom. Jay wrote the song. Jay produced it, plays all the instruments, recorded in his basement. Didn't even tell us about it till it was actually done. It was great. Really, really great. So right, country, really done. So apparently Phil decided we needed a jazzy version of a protest song. And so this week, Phil, I don't know if you've released it, but he sent me a copy of a new song he just did, which is called
Just Plain Wrong.
Just Plain Wrong. Great song. Very well. Very thoughtful. Anyway, so hopefully you'll be listening to that coming up here soon.
And it's a great theme song for Last Prisoner Project, right? I mean, that's really what it's about.
It's a great song for Last Prisoner.
And I was thinking I would dedicate it to Last Prisoner Project and maybe send it over to our friend Steve D'Angelo, see what he thinks.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be great.
So, if you listen to the song and you like it, send a couple bucks to LPP.
Yeah. So Faye and I are going to do a rap duet.
I can't wait to hear it. I can't wait to hear it.
as senior citizens hip hop, protest hip hop.
A polka mashup.
I'd rather do a reggae song.
There you go.
Oh, there you go.
That's
There
because
you
you
go.
just
There you
got
go.
back from Jamaica.
Yeah, man. We were talking that you were going to have dreadlocks when you came back
Yeah,
from Jamaica.
didn't happen.
I did that once.
Did
it
you?
hurt so bad.
It hurts?
Yeah, like all these little beads. It was awful.
I'm afraid it's too late for me to do that. Those days are gone.
Well, we could go on for hours. There's so much to talk about. We can't get to it all. So we try to share a lot of the stuff on social networking. So go to Facebook, LinkedIn. What are the other two? Instagram and Twitter. And just do a search for Vote Pro Pot.
A man sits in a prison cell, has been sitting there 10 years. The judge, he brought the gavel down, the jury shed no tears. He can't support his family, his children do without. He's been inside so long now, he don't remember being out. What's he in for anyway, with the murderers and pimps? Cops caught him with a joint one day, he's been in there ever since. Oh, how long must this go on? This ain't justice, it's just plain wrong. Oh, it's just plain wrong. A man sits in his mansion on the Caribbean shore. He got strippers in the hot tub, a machete in the drawer. He's got more money than Elon, got more weapons than Iran. He got rich the old-fashioned way by selling contraband. And everything he has, he owes to the DEA. The last thing any drug lord wants is prohibition to go away. Oh, how long must this go on? This ain't justice, it's just plain wrong. Coffee in the morning, glass of wine with the meal, valerian root at bedtime, or some tea with chamomile. Sugar on your cereal, a fine hand-rolled cigar. Things no one thinks twice about, they just are what they are. Pep up with some ginseng, relax with a beer. Pop a couple Xanax and let them melt away your fears. Lots of stuff that's legal makes you feel a certain way. But smoke a little sativa and they'll haul your ass away to stay. Well, now the government, they tell us marijuana's bad for you. It'll fry your brain like eggs in a pan. It's what evil people do. So that gives us the right, they say, to ban its use and sale. So don't you let us catch you, son, or you might end up in jail. Just remember, America, when we lock you in your cells, that we're doing this for your own good, to save you from yourselves. Oh, how long must this go on? This ain't justice, well, it's just plain wrong. Oh, I said this ain't justice, but it's just plain wrong. Oh, you know it's wrong. happened to my freedom?